De Havilland DH.98 Mosquito is an aircraft whose creation contradicted the entire logic of the development of British bombers in the 1930s. Flight characteristics of Mosquito BMK-4 aircraft. Engines. Rolls-Royce Merlin, 21 power, 1,460 horsepower. Wingspan. 16.51 meters. The length of the aircraft, 12.35 meters. Height of the aircraft, 4.65 meters. Wing area, 42.18 square meters. Weight, kilogram. Empty aircraft, 6,080. Normal takeoff weight, 9,900. Maximal takeoff weight, 10,152. Maximum speed, 619 km per hour. Rate of climb, 13.6 meters per second. Practical ceiling, 10,400 meters. Flying range, 2,570 kilometers. Each new generation of these machines was heavier and better armed than their predecessors. They required more powerful engines, and thus more fuel, which in turn led to heavier machines. Such an evolutionary approach substantially increased the resources required to build each bomber, and combined with a sharp increase in the fleet of combat aircraft could lead to the collapse of the economy. De Havilland designers S. Walker, R. Bishop, and J. de Havilland himself attempted to break out of this vicious circle by creating a small twin-engine high-speed plane devoid of any defensive armament. Speed was to be its only defense. Besides, the idea was to make an all-wood plane, which reduced the aircraft industry's demand for aluminum and allowed to use the woodworking industry's production capacity. Geoffrey de Havilland was born to an Anglican clergyman in Buckinghamshire. He was educated at Oxford University's boarding school, Edward VII Preparatory College, and the engineering school at Crystal Palace. After graduating in 1903, he was involved in automobile design. He did not become interested in aviation until after his marriage in 1909. In 1910, de Havilland built his first airplane, which crashed on its first attempt to take off. A second plane, more successful, he got airborne and was able to sell to his employer, the Royal Balloon Factory at Farnborough. By the beginning of World War II, de Havilland had experience in producing all types of civil aircraft then in existence, including Canadian amphibians, equipping them with their own engines. Combat use of the de Havilland Mosquito. Deliveries of Mosquitoes were slow. Priority was given to fighter and reconnaissance units. The 105th Squadron, which began receiving BMK-3s in November 1941, received only 9 of them by April of the following year. They made their combat debut on May 31, 1942, when 4 Mosquitoes struck Cologne. On September 19, the squadron's planes made their first daylight raid on Berlin. In November 1942, the 139th Squadron received the Mosquito BMK-4. Both squadrons specialized in low-altitude spot strikes at dawn or dusk. From June 1943, these units became part of the 8th Bomber Command's squadrons of targeting aircraft. The planes of the BMK-9 modification were first received by the 109th Squadron in April 1943, which later also became part of the 8th Group. At the turn of 1943-1944, de Havilland Mosquito BMK-4 planes were used by 627th and 692d Squadrons. The latter was the first of the Mosquito units to use the 1,814 kg cookie bombs, dropping them on Dusseldorf on the night of February 24, 1944. From the spring of 1944, night operations became dominant for the Mosquito because during daytime operations, despite the high speed of the aircraft, casualties were still very high. The 8 squadrons included in the Light Night Strike Force operated mainly BMK-16s but also BMK-20s and MK-25s of Canadian manufacture. Until the end of the war, they operated over the territory of Germany. For example, in March of 1945, Berlin was raided 27 times, and on the night of March 22, all 8 squadrons of that force, over 130 aircraft, were operating over the city. The last object of a massive Mosquito attack was Kiel. On the night of May 3, it was attacked in 2 waves by 116 aircraft. The use of heavy cookie bombs became commonplace. From January 1945 until the end of the war, Mosquitoes dropped almost 3,000 such bombs, 1,459 of them on Berlin. Mosquito bombers were not used in the Pacific Theater. Although in late 1944 the 628th Squadron, whose planes were equipped to use highball anti-ship rotary bombs, arrived in Australia, it was never used because of a lack of suitable targets and fear that the new weapon could be captured and copied by the enemy. DH.98 Mosquito BMK.35 aircraft did not have time to take part in combat operations. In the post-war period, they were operated by 3 squadrons stationed in Germany, until 1950, and by the 109th and 139th targeting squadrons stationed in metropolitan France. The latter were not rearmed with Canberra jets until 1952-1953. Mosquitoes of the Bomber Command flew nearly 40,000 combat sorties during the war, losing 254 machines. Thus, the loss rate was 0.63%, far lower than any other type of Royal Air Force bomber. The concept of the speed unarmed bomber has fully proven itself.